So Dan, if you could just take yourself off mute.
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. So keen to hear how you got into ESG, how long you've sort of been in the market, and sort of what you do at Telesca, maybe as just a starting point for everyone, just so everyone can get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, no worries. I guess Telesca first. So we are a recruitment consultancy. We specialize in renewable energy, ESG, and sustainability. We have been going for 25 months now, 26 months. So fairly, I guess, early in our journey in some regards, but sort of fairly far forward in others. I guess in terms of my own ESG and sustainability journey, I guess it's probably like everyone. It's pretty personal to me. I was working in Hong Kong for a long time in commercial real estate before I moved back into recruitment, and during that time, sort of fascinated by buildings, energy ratings, green buildings, and what's happening in that space. And then, funnily enough, I actually ended up living in Saudi Arabia for 3 years in Riyadh, working on a lot of the now sort of famous projects in NEOM's, Red Sea, and Qiddiya's when they were like had secret code names, and in very early days, and actually placed 3 chief sustainability officers and also the CEO of a nature reserve out there. And during sort of the months spent in those processes, getting to know those candidates really, really well, and I guess being educated on what was going on in the world and what's really happening when it comes to climate crisis and the problems they're trying to solve, I sort of jumped into that quite heavily, and it became a real sort of personal passion point of mine. I think particularly having young kids, you think differently as well. And then I guess on the back of that, came back to Australia and was like, right, well, how can I put my skill set to use to try and aid the climate crisis, or aid the people supporting the climate crisis rather. And I'm not a scientist, unfortunately. I'm not a climate expert, but I think I have sort of got a set of skills that can support the industry. So hence a sort of leap into ESG and sustainability and recruiting in that space.
Yeah, awesome. I guess that's a great example of you using your own skills to sort of pave your own way and find your own role in the market, in the climate space and in ESG. So you've been running sort of Telesca for like 2 and a bit years now. I'm curious to understand what have you seen sort of change in the market? Like, have you been through a few, I guess, cycles, would you say, of recruitment, or like what does the market movements look like?
I think 2 years ago we were at a really cool point where there was a big surge in sustainability. Everyone was rejoicing, particularly sustainability leaders, that the wheels had sort of motion, and it was an interesting time because I'd be speaking to people who've been within sustainability for like 15 to 20 years, right? And they were like exhausted, burnt out, shattered, because they'd been the ones who'd been like pounding their head off a concrete wall for so long, and finally it was their time when the wheels are turning, and it was like, geez, guys, like you can't even like dust yourself down and go again because you finally broke through, but everyone is exhausted. So the wheels started to turn. I think there's a lot of rejoicing that sustainability leaders everyone was referring to having their seat at the adult table, in terms of organizations and being taken very seriously. But I think actually since that, we've seen a sort of, I think, a slowdown. I think there's a number of things that have caused that. I think last year the economy has been pretty tight. I think if you ask most markets and most industries, like making money and having a strong bottom line is becoming more and more difficult. So organizations sort of push their resources to other areas, and unfortunately sustainability is often a victim of that, which is kind of ironic, because if you sort of get on top of your sustainability, right, you tend to run a more streamlined and more resilient and more profitable business. And that's another conversation, but I almost think sometimes we have to not talk about sustainability and say to business leaders, look, do you want to run a profitable and resilient business? And the answer will be yes, sort of 99.9% of the time, right? So there's economic factors. I also think mandatory reporting as well, while it's great, and I think mandatory reporting really has its place, it kind of put a pause on a lot of things as well, because suddenly everyone was like, right, mandatory reporting has come through Senate, it's live, it's around the corner. And people were in sort of two camps. You had the bigger end of town who have been reporting ASX listed companies for years and got their heads around it pretty quickly and said, cool, we know what we're doing, we understand this, We need to add some ESG expertise to our reporting teams, and we can move forward. But there's a huge group of companies that are like, we're not ready for this. We don't even know if we're Group 1, Group 2, Group 3. We were Group 2, we just merged with someone else. Now we're a Group 1. And I think that's really dominated the talent market ever since. We're not seeing, not fair not to call them high impact roles, but we're not seeing sort of a lot of sort of strategic sustainability roles or high impact roles when you're working on tangible projects. The big focus and what we see in the market at the moment is certainly around governance and reporting, and I suspect it will stay that way for the next 12 months at least. If not, slow down a little bit, because we've got a federal election coming in and no one likes uncertainty when it comes to decision making, unfortunately.
Yeah. And just a quick shout out, if you're not already following Dan on LinkedIn, make sure too, because he puts out a lot of great thought leadership. And you posted yesterday, Dan, like, I guess when people are kind of considering what sort of roles are out there in sustainability, they immediately go towards ESG. And, that's been largely, as you said, sort of occupied by mandatory reporting over the last 12 months, especially as it sort of comes into play. Curious with your statement that you feel, ESG may be dead. Like, are we able to dig a bit deeper into that?
Yeah, I think the statement was a lot around the title of that podcast episode, right? It's and for anyone who go and jump in the podcast, it's 50 minutes long. Or I think Luke Keelbooth, who's also on LinkedIn, the CEO of BWD, shared a paper too. It was more discussion around, how the ESG had to stay, because if you look at 12 months ago, like Larry Finch and BlackRock turned their back on the phrase ESG. Was it following the same path as sort of CSR, where it's had to stay in the headlights and the sort of term was dying off? Is it ESG fatigue? So, is it dead or is not? I think that's open to interpretation, but it's certainly an interesting discussion. I don't think it's dead as such. I think it's just going to change. I think if you take the elements of ES and G, like social, like governance is reporting, right? We're seeing that, we've spoken about that. So you've got the G's kind of covered and being integrated. The social piece still needs work, and I think there'll be growth in the social market eventually, but you maybe have one or two people within an organization looking after social performance and social engagement. And the E, to me, the environmental piece is really comes under sustainability, and that's physical climate change, right? But then a lot of that we're going to sort of see wrapped up in climate risk, business strategy, and it's a risk function, or it's becoming a risk function essentially. Can your business, if you're running a business and your supply chain's based out of California primarily, then what does the bushfire mean to you? Or what does the heat wave in South Australia? How does that affect your business? Become more risk based. So that's where I think this term sort of the death of ESG kind of comes from, and I think it's come back into conversation now with Donald Trump coming in and sort of his attitude of drill baby drill. So that it's a prominent conversation. Is it dead as such? I don't think ESG is dead. I think far from it, but I think perhaps the term is potentially maybe having its day, and I think there's certainly what I would sort of class as ESG fatigue when it comes to C-suites and boards. But it just changes, it becomes green investment rather than ESG investment and so on and so forth, right? But the actual phase, maybe its days are numbered.
Yeah, I mean, like I feel like in my circles at least, a lot of the conversations are moving towards like how are we reindustrializing our economies, how are we going to be rebuilding and building in a sort of sustainable way. So I definitely sort of like take that point, and it's a really interesting conversation topic. And just from what you've sort of said there, I'm sort of taking that, we need to reconceptualize green skills into existing functions within a business. You mentioned risk, for example. What would you say are those like top functions within a business to be looking at in terms of like applying green skills? Yeah. And what would you say like are the top like transferable skills that can be applied in a context of developing green skills and better applying them, I guess, with a sustainability lens for a business?
Yeah.
And not to just throw a bunch of questions at you, but one last one, like how do we articulate that to a potential employer?
Good questions. I think trying to break it down from the top, right? I think if we're looking ahead, and you want to, or you're looking at your own career or where you sit in this industry, I actually think the first decision you need to make is, are you going to work in consulting and in-house, right? Because the two are different, and it has been done, but you rarely see people from in-house type roles go and smash it in consulting. And you see a lot of people from consulting who want to go in-house, and after 12 to 18 months, they're like, it's a bit slow. It's not what I thought it was, right? So we do suit different personality types, okay? With all the uncertainty and the mandatory reporting and the slimming down of sustainability teams and organizations, which we've seen, I think we'll see continued growth in consulting, in niche consulting. So I think if you're chasing a career in strategy, or you want to consult, or you like the projects and you like the pace of it, then consulting is looking really good. I think it will remain strong. I think, and this is only my opinion, the key to success now in terms of building a career within sustainability in an organization is going to be aligning yourself to functions and functionalities, and almost being like multidisciplined, okay? If you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would have been like, look, yeah, it's going to be great. Organizations will have a sustainability function. There'll be a head of sustainability or a CSO, and we'll have a function within that. I think that's where we're seeing a drastic change. I don't believe we'll see we'll see sustainability functions. And I actually speak to a lot of heads and chiefs of sustainability officers who think also, this role, I'm not sure where it goes. Am I becoming a strategist, or am I becoming a risk specialist? So my advice would be, therefore, decide within sustainability and ESG, like, where do you want to make your impact? Is it going to be in the reporting and the governance and the policy making side? Are you more of a strategist? Do you want to work in overarching strategy and how you roll out sustainability across an organization or supply chain or different markets? Are you more of a social science person? You want to work on the social side of things, and then actually start aligning yourself to a function, because I strongly believe, and I may be proven wrong, but I strongly believe that sustainability already is kind of at the stage where it's becoming ingrained in organizations, right? Any smart organization now only has to look internationally at sort of geopolitical situations and or physical climate threats and say, if we don't take this seriously and look at how it affects our business, and we're going to be in trouble, right? So it becomes strategy, doesn't it? So you'll have a chief strategy officer or a strategy function with climate expertise, and then you're going to have physical climate risk, which will sit within a risk function, okay? Then you've got the governance side, which will sit within finance, and finally that social side, which may sit on its own, but will be small, 1 or 2 person teams. So I think the biggest piece of advice I can give is start working out what your skill sets are currently. Can you be like an all-court player, right? Can you be a strategist who leans really hard on ESG and sustainability? Can you be accounting and reporting background but focus on ESG? If you can be that all-court player and be able to sort of work in a function within an organization and be multi-skilled, then you're well on your way, and you'll become that sustainability voice within the organization. Yeah, not sure if that answers all the questions.
No, I think that was fantastic, because I threw a lot at you there. I'm sort of also curious. You sort of have mentioned before as well on LinkedIn that, like, there's been this problem of ill-defining, what those functions or like roles are, and like a lot of the time when businesses are hiring, they don't even know what they're hiring for. A lot of the time, a sustainability officer or someone who's like doing reporting is understaffed and like overwhelmed, and they have to, do multiple different functions, and can lead to, burnout in some instances. What do you think needs to happen to like further address that, like get clearer on those functions? And then, like, what do you think maybe some of those emergent functions are that we'll see over the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I think we're getting there in that. I think actually, like, people just, how do you solve a problem? People need to be a bit more honest. I think when they're recruiting and building teams, I think now more than ever, like, what I see is before, people like worked purely for money, right? And it was career, money, growth, so on and so forth, right? Now more than ever, I believe people are looking to align personal value with organizational value, right? That's a key driver for a lot of people, right? It's, yes, money has to be good still and there's certainly benefits, but if this organization's values don't line with mine as an individual, like, it's never going to work, and it never does. And people walk away from jobs pretty quickly, which is cool. Like, you've got your personal belief systems, you have to align to that. And I think actually the onus is on the organisations to be a bit more honest in their job ads. And I think because there's been this perceived sort of shortage of talent, people post job ads and they're like, well, if we call it a sustainability manager, people will flock to it. And we talk about making an impact in society and projects, and people will apply for the jobs. The reality is, when you break down the job advert and read it carefully, it's 95% reporting and governance, if that's a role. And that's why a lot of people are applying for jobs and thinking, hey, like, I've got a great background here, I've done all this stuff, but I'm getting sort of not back at first interview, not even to reply, because the truth is they're looking for a reporting and governance person, and that might not be the one. The one bit you haven't got is that reporting and governance piece, an example, right? So the onus is on the employers and the organisations to do better. We're getting there. I've seen a couple of jobs already advertised this year for a reporting manager or a sustainability governance manager. So people are thinking about it more, which is good. What was the last bit of the question?
Just, you mentioned it there, like sort of reporting manager or
yeah.
What are those?
Yeah, and I think the biggest sort of growth set in a minute, I think for me, we'll see the next 12 months is just going to be that governance piece. I mean, like, I saw Richard Griffiths popped up in the comments there, right? And we speak a lot. And if you ask any of the major consultancies at the moment, the vast majority of work they're doing is on reporting and governance, right? They want to be doing more strategy work and more project work, but that's where the growth is, right? And that's where the panic is within organizations, and that's where the skill shortage is. Is there a skill shortage? Probably not, but is there people who want to go and work in sustainability and report and just do governance? That's where the skills gap is, right? Because a lot of people could do it, but it doesn't fill their cup. It's not going to make them happy, which is, again, totally understandable and absolutely fine. But if that's your case, you need to look at some other areas where you can try and make impact or add value.
Yeah, and one last question for me, and then I'll hand it to everyone else. But you sort of mentioned, consulting or in-house as two options.
Yep.
You see sort of like maybe the startup or scale-up avenue as a, like, sustainability focused startups and scale-ups as an avenue to create that like greater impact potentially. Do you have much business to that area?
Good question. I think so. Like, the startups ecosystems is happening, it's busy, but a lot of startups, like, the challenge of a startup, right, is always cash flow and having money to invest in people. And I think, again, having like sort of worked in recruitment all over the world and worked with startups, it's a certain individual who survives a startup, right? And again, that's absolutely fine. Some people perform really well in environments, whereas departments and structures and processes and systems, and you throw them into an environment where it's like everyone's a CEO and everyone's a T-boy and there's no structure and work out as you go, and it doesn't work for them, right? Transversely, like, I love chaos. So like working in a startup is perfect for me because I like having 400 things going on at once. Probably doesn't help, I can never actually finish a task, but like personally I prefer those environments, right? So, and the advantage of those is if you get involved in a startup early and it's successful, then you can make an impact, right? And you're there from day one, and you can have that impact in the strategy, you can have that impact in the direction you take, you can have that impact across supply chain. So you can make significant impact. Just be prepared, if you're looking for life, work-life balance and all that sort of stuff, like, just think hard about that before you go into a startup, because if you want to be successful in a startup or work for a successful startup, it's a real sort of life choice, I would say.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. Does anyone have any questions they want to sort of unmute themselves and ask Daniel directly? Over to the crew.
I've got one, Daniel.
Hi.
As someone who's trying to enter into the job market, sort of in a career change, a lot of entry-level jobs still require a level of experience, and I'm finding that that's often where I kind of get to, and I think a lot of other people do, before being unsuccessful for a lot of roles. What's your advice for someone, who doesn't have that specific experience, but really wanting to enter into this market?
Good question. What sort of roles are you looking at, and where are you now?
I've done a degree in environment at ESG Consulting, which I'm now finding may not be the direct path, but sustainability consulting type of work. Yeah.
Cool. I think what you need to do, and is where people, a lot of it comes down from even how you present yourself in your CV, right? And I spend a lot of time sort of trying to help people rewrite CVs. If you can, there'll be stuff you've done in your studies or projects in your degrees that you're probably not maybe demonstrating as clearly as you possibly could. So I think bring that relevant experience to like as much as you can to yourself. Sorry, out to the floor, so it's really impactful, and it's the first thing people see when they see a profile from Amelia. It's like project, or relevant experience. I think I'd go over. So I know that people that I've spoken to candidates who've done some interning, so they've been trying to get into the space. They've had a day job, but they've done some interning in the evenings or in the background to support some of the smaller consultancies who have got big workloads and maybe don't have the cash flow, if that makes sense, to get some experience. Even if you did that for 6 months, 9 months, and you get some exposure, and you have that in your profile, and you've got that, you bridge that experience gap. So again, sometimes it's going just that little extra mile and thinking, cool, like, could I pick up some interning work or some, even a side hustle, a secondary sort of role, supporting a consultancy on a part-time basis at some sort of level to gain some additional experience might help.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
No worries.
Awesome question, Amelia. Does anyone else have any questions? Also, we've got Dan here.
Dan, probably is right here, probably related to Amelia. I'm probably a mid-career, looking to transition into it. So I suppose I bring a lot of transferable skills, but I'm also finding that I've not had any consulting. I can't say I've got experience as a consultant, but I've worked in an extremely large organization. I'm finding that they sort of say, well, how can you show you're going to be a good consultant? Which, I don't even fully understand the role probably.
Yeah. So I think to break that down, I think when people, and to maybe pull the bonnet back on that, I think when people say, how can you be a really good consultant? Most consultancies are actually trying to dig in and talk about networks and can you win work. It's the biggest challenge consultants have, right? Is a lot of expertise and a lot of knowledge, but don't always have sort of work winners or people of network. So if you can come in and say, listen, haven't consulted but worked in these large scale organizations and actually, I've got a good network base, I think I might be able to open some doors, at least stimulate some conversations. People would definitely take notice of that and sort of put their hands up. And then the other piece there is, if you can, in your current role and what you've done is don't focus so much on the role, but focus on projects you've delivered, because consulting is all project based, right? So within your current role, like what particular initiatives or outcomes or projects have you worked on that have had a deliverable against them? And then that sort of shows that you've run projects or been involved in projects that have had an outcome, you can deliver something. If you lean towards that side more, that might stimulate that conversation a little bit. That makes sense.
Thank you.
I think just in general there, it's the one thing to bear in mind, guys, on CVs and when you're applying for jobs. Like the number of times I speak to candidates and I'll speak about their CV and we have this almost like a completely different discussion. Like, well, I did this and I did this and I delivered this and that. And I'm like, this is amazing, but why is it not appearing in your CV? And one of two things. One, because people are fixated about a CV in 2 pages. Don't be. Like, no one's ever not got a job because their CV wasn't 2 pages. Trust me. So don't stress about that. But equally, it's human nature, and Australia is bad for it, and the UK is bad for that sort of tall poppy syndrome. People underplay their skills. Like, be super proud of what you've done. And at the start of every sort of job piece in your CV, talk about achievements and projects and deliverables, because people know you've kind of got the experience to have the job, to have had the role. But if you can demonstrate how you put that into practical project experience or initiative experience, then it's a different story, because you can be like, well, actually, we're planning to do that in our organization next year, and they've got that experience, or our clients need this. We've got loads of project work in this space, and this person's done that. So really focus on achievements and projects on your profile.
Awesome.
If there's
Thanks
time,
for the question. Sorry.
if there's time for another question, I've got a 2-parter, Dan.
Yeah.
I think, sorry, Amanda, we probably do have time if you're okay, Dan, but Richard
I'm good.
has his hand up first.
Yeah.
Oh.
So then we'll go to Richard and then Amanda, and you next, Amanda, if that's okay.
First of all, great value conversation. Thank you very, very much. First question is about LinkedIn and profiles, and the sense in which when you're going for work, Occasionally profiles are accessed. Clearly people are looking at your suitability for the role, and but there's no follow through. And I'm wondering to what level of detail should we be providing on our LinkedIn profiles? Because it does seem like you're not getting the opportunity to pitch occasionally.
Yeah.
That's part one. Part two relates to interim work. So lately I've seen two different organizations, one in the consulting space and one a recruiter, who are offering placed heads of sustainability on, say, a 3, 6, 9 month basis. And I'd like your observation on that as a growing market trend.
Yeah. So if we take the first part, I think LinkedIn, your LinkedIn profile is an interesting one, right? And I've obviously done a lot of work in this and fairly active on LinkedIn. So your LinkedIn profile needs to be detailed. So the more detail you put in your LinkedIn profile, the better for me. Like, have a personal bio, have all your jobs on there in chronological order, I should say. And your LinkedIn profile, you almost want to be like a sort of guide, right? Like someone who's built a land. If you go on my LinkedIn profile, it clearly says, and I think in the banner, sort of connecting ESG professionals, right? So immediately you know what I do. So I think when people land on your LinkedIn page, you need to know exactly who you are and what you do, sort of within the first 1 or 2 seconds. So make sure that's really clear. And then by having sort of more detailed paragraphs or job updates, and people like, because a lot of systems and recruiters will just search LinkedIn via keywords, and they'll just match keywords in your profiles, right? So make sure you sort of go into some depth there. And the other thing I would say about LinkedIn is it's a bit like a relationship, like what you put in, you get back, right? So be active, like post your thoughts. People talk about, I hate the term thought leaders because there's no such thing as a thought leader as thought sharers, right? No one, these people have like, LinkedIn top voice, expert this, thought leader. There's a nonsense, right? No one's a thought leader. People just share thoughts and we go from there. Okay, so don't be scared to post, to share thoughts, share ideas, and create conversation, because from there you'll get interaction, and then people will reach out to say, that was a really good post, or totally agree with you, I'd like to have a side conversation. Or again, if someone's commenting something, you can say, hey, listen, thanks so much for commenting on my post, like really appreciate it, would you be keen to have a chat about this further? So you're almost taking a different approach to it, if that makes sense. You're disarming the conversation around jobs and employment. The interim piece is interesting. Is it growing? I think it is. I think it will. Probably a little bit slow now, but there's a lot of people also putting their hands up. So again, I could list off probably about 20, 25 people I've spoken to the last 6 months who have left roles and are setting up individual consultancies or looking for interim roles. So I think there is. I actually think, I've said it to a few people, I think people, if someone could get like a group together and start little collectives, I think they'd be onto a winner, right? Because everyone has slightly different skill sets within sustainability. So whether it's leadership or change management or supply chain or communication or reporting, I think there's enough people now in the interim market to almost create some collectives and then be able to go to organizations with a bit more sort of power and weight behind you to listen, look, we're a collective of interim professionals, but we can probably cover you fully here at different points in your journey at different stages. Does that answer the question somewhat?
Nice, like it. Thanks, Dan.
Pleasure.
Could be Climate Crow Consulting on our hands soon.
Generally, I think like someone needs to look at that, because there's a lot of talent working out there who want to interim contract roles.
And maybe just as like a challenge to you all, maybe think and reflect on what you've taken out of this conversation and how it applies in the context of your own skill sets, and think about drafting like a post on LinkedIn to post to your network to start those conversations. Maybe just something to take away. Do you have time for one more question, Daniel?
Yeah, can I just ask, something I've thought about doing is almost like a sort of course or webinar on LinkedIn profiles, if it'd be interested in that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Richard, do you have a question?
No, more of a comment, really. One of the things I can't remember the name of the guy just now that mentioned about trying to break into consulting and being
right,
or that he doesn't have enough consulting skills. Having just spent 8 years in the consulting business, I think there's too many people in consulting that don't have business skills. So don't underestimate the value that you can bring as somebody that's been in-house and, you know, knows how to get things through an organization, because that's enormously valuable, I think, in consulting. And the best thing you can do is find a consultancy that values that stuff rather than assume that because you don't have those skills, the consulting skills, that you all of a sudden don't make a good consultant. The other thing, just to pull up to the point about creating a collective, Daniel, I don't know if you've seen Lee Stewart's crew. So ESG strategy, he's doing exactly that. So he's creating a sort of network of associates who all have incredible skills, and the aim of that organization is to kind of bring people together to do projects on a project by project basis, and they all dissipate and do their own thing separately. But also they're leaning into the sort of fractional CSO thing as well. So it's worth taking a look at them if people on the call haven't seen them already.
Yeah, nice.
Thanks, Richard. Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time, Dan. Really appreciate it. Everyone, make sure to give Dan a follow on LinkedIn. He's well worth a follow and posts a lot of interesting thoughts. One last thing I'll say, if you are looking for sort of that project-based experience, we offer project-based learning through Economy in the climate stream, which you can check out here. And we are offering one supported place for this upcoming cohort. So if budget's a bit tight, make sure to put in an application. We can provide one supported place so you can get that project-based experience. I've just provided the links in the chat and you can follow up with an email. But yeah, thank you for everyone for joining along today. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much, Dan.
Pleasure. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the time. And yeah, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn and keep in touch.
Awesome. See you all.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.